The morning Tharka arrived in Millbrook carrying nothing but a worn knife and the clothes on her back. The villagers watched from behind their shutters and whispered prayers to ward off evil. She stood in the center of the dirt road, green skin gleaming with sweat from her long journey, her muscular frame casting a shadow across the well where two women had frozen mid-conversation. The tusks protruding from her lower jaw were small compared to most orcs, but they were enough to send the women scattering toward their homes, buckets abandoned. Tharka had expected this. She had walked for 3 weeks after her clan cast her out, sleeping in ditches and stealing scraps from travelers' camps. And in all that time, not a single human settlement had offered her anything but threats and thrown stones. But Millbrook was the last village before the Great Waste, and winter was coming. If they turned her away, she would die. The door to the tavern swung open, and a man stepped out. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sandy hair that fell across his forehead, and the kind of lean build that came from constant work, rather than deliberate training. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms marked with old scars, and his eyes were a warm brown that studied her without the immediate hatred she had grown accustomed to seeing. "You are blocking the road," he said, his voice neither hostile nor friendly. Tharka straightened her shoulders. "I need work. I can labor. I am strong." "We do not need orc labor." This came from a different man, older and heavier, who had emerged from the mill with flour dusting his apron. "Move along before we make you move." The first man, the one with brown eyes, held up a hand. "Wait, Gareth, let me think." "Think?" Gareth's face reddened. "Ivan, your father would have run her off with a torch." "Ivan Ashford." Tharka filed the name away, watching him carefully. He was considering something, and that alone made him different from every other human she had encountered. "My father is dead," Ivan said quietly, "and I make my own decisions about my property." He turned back to Tharka. "Can you really work? This is not a place for the weak." "We are a farming village and harvest is upon us." "I can work harder than any human," Tharka said. It was not a boast, simply fact. Orcs were bred for endurance. Ivan nodded slowly. "I have a barn. It leaks, but it has walls and a door. You can sleep there if you work my fields. 2 weeks. If you cause trouble, you leave immediately if you work well." He trailed off as if he had not thought that far ahead. "I will work well," Tharka said. Gareth made a disgusted sound. "You will regret this, Ivan. Orcs are not meant to live among civilized folk." "Then it is fortunate I am paying her in shelter, not civilization," Ivan replied, and there was an edge to his voice that made Gareth step back. He gestured for Tharka to follow him. "Come, I will show you where you will stay." The barn was exactly as he described, weathered wood with gaps between the boards and a roof that had clearly seen better days. But it was shelter, and there was straw for bedding, and Tharka had slept in far worse conditions since leaving her clan. "The well is behind the house," Ivan said, pointing. "You may draw water when you need it. Work begins at dawn. We are harvesting wheat." "I understand." He studied her for a long moment, and Tharka found herself unable to read his expression. Curiosity, perhaps, mixed with caution. "Why are you alone? Orcs travel in clans." "I was cast out." "For what crime?" Tharka hesitated. The truth felt too vulnerable, too exposing. But lying seemed pointless when she had nothing left to lose. "I refused to raid a human settlement. There were children there." "I said we should trade instead of attack." She lifted her chin. "My chieftain said I was weak, a disgrace, so I left before they could kill me for cowardice." Ivan's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. "That took courage." "It took stupidity," Tharka said bitterly. "Now I am alone and my clan still raids. But those children live." Ivan turned toward his farmhouse, a modest structure with a garden plot beside it. Sometimes stupidity and courage are the same thing. Get some rest. Dawn comes early. That first day in the fields, Tharka worked until her hands bled. She cut wheat with a scythe Ivan provided, moving through the rows with mechanical precision, while the other villagers who had been hired to help kept their distance. They watched her with fear and fascination, whispering among themselves but never speaking to her directly. Ivan worked alongside them, his own scythe flashing in the autumn sun. He did not treat her differently than the others, did not coddle or threaten. When noon came, he distributed bread and cheese to everyone. Tharka received the same portion as the human workers, though several of them loudly complained about sharing food with a monster. "She works, she eats," Ivan said simply. "If that troubles you, you may leave and forfeit your wages." No one left. Money was too scarce, especially with winter approaching. By the time the sun set, Tharka had harvested twice as much wheat as any of the human laborers. Her shoulders ached and her hands were raw, but she felt something she had not experienced in months' purpose. Ivan found her in the barn after dark, carrying a bucket of water and clean cloth. "For your hands," he said, setting them down just inside the door. "You pushed too hard today. I must prove my worth." "You already did that." He glanced at the bandages she had improvised from torn fabric. "You do not need to injure yourself to earn your keep." "Why do you treat me with kindness?" The question emerged before Tharka could stop it. "Your people hate orcs." Ivan leaned against the doorframe, his face partially shadowed. "I was a soldier once, fought in the border wars. I killed orcs and orcs killed my friends." He paused and pain flickered across his features. "But one day I was wounded and separated from my unit. An orc found me a female like you. She could have finished me easily. Instead, she bandaged my wound and left me water before disappearing into the forest. I never knew why." Tharka felt something twist in her chest. Perhaps she saw a person, not an enemy. Perhaps. Ivan met her eyes. "When you appeared today, I thought of her, wondered what happened to her. If she was cast out too for showing mercy." He straightened. "Sleep well, Tharka. Tomorrow will be just as difficult." Over the following days, a strange routine developed. Tharka worked the fields from dawn until dusk, her orc strength allowing her to accomplish in hours what took human laborers all day. The villagers slowly grew accustomed to her presence, though most still avoided speaking to her directly. Children would peek at her from behind their mother's skirts, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. In the evenings, Ivan would sometimes come to the barn with food leftovers from his own dinner that he claimed he could not finish. Tharka knew he was lying, that he was deliberately preparing extra so she would not go hungry, but she accepted the offerings without comment. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. One evening, nearly a week after her arrival, Ivan lingered longer than usual. "I have been thinking," he said, watching as Tharka cleaned her borrowed scythe, "about your comment that orcs should trade rather than raid. It was foolish thinking. My clan made that clear. I disagree." Ivan sat on an overturned bucket, his posture relaxed in a way that suggested he had come for conversation rather than business. "What would orcs trade? What do they have that humans need?" Tharka paused in her work. No one had ever asked her that before. "Metalwork. Orcs are skilled smiths. And we can craft leather goods that last for decades. We know herbs and medicines from the deep forests that human healers have never seen." She set down the scythe. "But humans will not trade with monsters. Some might, if they were desperate enough, if they were shown the value." Ivan leaned forward, his eyes bright with thought. "The world is changing, Tharka. The wars cannot continue forever. Eventually, we will need to find another way." "That is a dream for people who can afford dreams," Tharka said, but she felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words. Here was a human who saw possibility instead of only threat, perhaps. Ivan stood, brushing dust from his trousers. But all change begins with someone foolish enough to dream. He headed toward the door, then paused. The harvest festival is in 3 days. The whole village cooks and shares food. You are welcome to attend if you wish. They will not want me there. I am inviting you. That means you are welcome. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face into something boyish and warm. Think about it. After he left, Tharka lay in her straw bed and stared at the barn roof, her mind churning. A harvest festival. A celebration among humans. It would be foolish to attend, would only highlight how different she was, how unwelcome. But Ivan had invited her. And despite every instinct screaming at her to maintain distance, to protect herself from inevitable rejection, she found herself wanting to go. The next morning, Tharka approached Ivan as he was inspecting the harvested wheat. "The festival," she said without preamble. "Is there food?" "Of course." "Everyone brings something they have made." "Then I will bring something too." Ivan looked surprised. "You do not have to. I will bring food," Tharka insisted. "If I am to attend, I will contribute." A slow smile spread across Ivan's face. "All right, do you need supplies?" "Ingredients." "I need access to a kitchen, and certain herbs if they grow nearby. You can use my kitchen tomorrow evening. The festival is not until sunset the day after." He studied her curiously. "What will you make?" "A dish from my homeland. You will see." Tharka felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. This was taking a risk, revealing something personal. But she was tired of hiding, tired of being only a strong back and a monster's face. The following evening, Ivan opened his home to her. The kitchen was simple but well equipped, with a hearth for cooking and shelves lined with basic supplies. Tharka moved through the space with increasing confidence, her hands remembering the motions her mother had taught her years ago. Ivan watched from the doorway as she worked, crushing herbs with a mortar and pestle, chopping root vegetables with precise cuts, mixing ingredients in a large clay pot. The smell that began to fill the kitchen was rich and complex spices that humans rarely used, combined in ways that created entirely new flavors. "What is it called?" Ivan asked, moving closer. "We call it hearth stew in the common tongue." In Orc language, the name means food that makes enemies into family. Tharka stirred the pot, adjusting the heat. It was traditionally served at peace negotiations. The spices and herbs have properties that ease tension, promote calm. Magic? No. Just knowledge of plants and their effects on the body. She tasted the stew, added a pinch more salt. "My mother was a cook for the chieftain. She taught me everything she knew, but orcs do not value cooking as a worthy skill. Strength in battle is what matters." Ivan was silent for a moment. "My mother was a cook too. She died when I was young, but I remember her in the kitchen, humming while she worked. She said feeding people was its own form of strength. She was wise." "Yes." His voice was soft with memory. "I think she would have liked you." Tharka felt her tusks warm with pleasure, a physical response she could not control. She kept her eyes on the stew, afraid to reveal how much his words affected her. This human man, this Ivan Ashford who had shown her kindness when no one else would, was burrowing past her defenses in ways she had not anticipated. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me do this, for giving me a chance. You earned that chance." Ivan came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "You have worked harder than anyone I have ever employed. The other laborers are half finished with their sections while you have completed 3. You are." He hesitated. "You are remarkable." Tharka's breath caught. She turned to look at him and found his brown eyes fixed on her face, not with fear or disgust, but with something that looked dangerously like admiration. "I am an orc," she said, as if reminding him. "I know what you are." His voice was rough. "I have eyes, Tharka." The moment stretched between them, charged with an energy that made Tharka's heart pound. She was suddenly, intensely aware of how close they were standing, of the way Ivan's gaze dropped to her mouth before jerking back up. "The stew is ready," she said, breaking the spell. "It needs to cool overnight. Tomorrow it will be perfect." Ivan stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "Right, good, I will let you finish here." He retreated toward the door with uncharacteristic awkwardness, then paused. "Tharka, I am glad you came to Millbrook." He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the kitchen with her stew and her racing thoughts. The harvest festival took place in the village square, long tables arranged in a circle around a bonfire that crackled and sparked against the darkening sky. Villagers arrived carrying dishes, roasted meats, fresh breads, fruit pies, wheels of cheese. The air filled with laughter and the sound of children playing, families reuniting after a long day's work. Tharka arrived carrying her pot of hearth stew, her hands steady despite the nervous energy coursing through her. She had dressed in the cleanest clothes she owned, washed her face and hands until they were spotless. It felt important, somehow, to make an effort. The laughter died when she entered the square. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Dozens of eyes turned toward her, and Tharka felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure. Then Ivan was there, appearing at her side with a smile that seemed to push back the tension. "Perfect timing," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Tharka has brought a dish to share. Let us find a place for it on the table." He guided her to the main table, where the most impressive dishes were displayed. Several people shifted their offerings away from where Tharka set down her pot, as if contamination might spread through proximity. "It smells strange," a woman muttered to her neighbor. "Probably poisoned," someone else whispered, not quite quietly enough. Tharka felt her shoulders tighten, her jaw clench. She had been foolish to think this would go differently, that showing skill in cooking would matter to people who saw her as nothing but a monster. "I am sure it is fine," Ivan said, his voice carrying a warning edge. "Tharka has been working my land for more than a week now, and I am still healthy." "You are mad to trust an orc," Gareth the miller said, pushing through the crowd. "This is a harvest festival for the village, Ivan, not a charity for monsters." "Tharka is my guest," Ivan said coldly. "Would you insult my hospitality?" The tension in the square thickened. Gareth's face reddened, and several other men moved to stand behind him, presenting a united front. Tharka recognized the prelude to violence. She had seen it enough times in her life. "Perhaps I should go," she said quietly to Ivan. "No." His hand found hers, warm and solid and squeezed. "You belong here as much as anyone." "Let us settle this with proof," an elderly woman said, stepping forward. Tharka recognized her as Mildred, the village healer who occasionally came to the fields to tend injured workers. "If the orc's food is safe, someone should taste it first. If they survive without illness, then we will know it is not poisoned." "I will taste it," Ivan said immediately. "No." Tharka pulled her hand from his. "I will taste it myself. I am the one being accused." She lifted the lid from the pot, releasing a cloud of fragrant steam that made several people nearby lean in despite themselves. Using the ladle, she scooped a generous portion into a wooden bowl and, maintaining eye contact with the hostile crowd, took a large mouthful. The flavors exploded across her tongue, rich, savory, perfectly spiced. It was good. She had done her mother proud. "There," she said after swallowing. "If I die, you may throw my body beyond the village boundary." "Give me some," Mildred said, moving forward with surprising spryness. She took the bowl from Tharka's hands and tried a spoonful, her weathered face thoughtful. Then she tried another, and another. Well, Gareth demanded. Is it poisoned or not? Mildred looked up, her eyes wide. It is the most delicious thing I have eaten in 30 years. The crowd stirred with uncertainty and curiosity. Several younger villagers moved closer, drawn by the smell and Mildred's reaction. Let me try, a boy of perhaps 16 said, reaching for a bowl. His mother tried to stop him, but he shrugged her off and ladled himself a serving. His eyes widened at the first taste. Mother, you have to try this. Like water breaching a dam, the resistance crumbled. One by one, villagers approached the pot, curiosity overcoming fear. They tried small, cautious portions at first, but soon were returning for seconds and thirds. The hearth stew disappeared faster than any other dish at the festival, people gathering around to marvel at the complex flavors and the way the food seemed to warm them from the inside out. What is in this? A farmer named Thomas asked, his bowl already empty. I have never tasted anything like it. Tharka found herself surrounded by people who minutes ago had wanted her gone, all of them asking questions about ingredients and preparation. She answered haltingly at first, then with growing confidence as she realized they were genuinely interested. The herbs grow in the eastern forest, she explained, and the root vegetables are common, but the trick is in the preparation. You must cut them precisely so they cook evenly. Could you teach us? A young woman asked shyly. To make this? Yes, I could teach you. The evening transformed into something Tharka had never experienced. People spoke to her, asked her about orc culture, shared their own recipes and cooking stories. The children, emboldened by their parents' acceptance, crept closer to examine her tusks and ask if they hurt. She let them touch her green skin, their small fingers tentative and curious. Ivan stood back, watching it all with a satisfied smile. When their eyes met across the bonfire, Tharka felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the food or the fire, and everything to do with the man who had given her this chance. As the night deepened and the festival began to wind down, Ivan approached with 2 mugs of hot cider. You did it, he said, handing her one. They laughed when you said you could cook, but one taste shut every mouth in the village. They did not laugh, Tharka pointed out. They were afraid. Close enough. He clinked his mug against hers. You changed their minds, Tharka. That is no small thing. I changed what they think of my cooking, she corrected, not what they think of orcs. It is a start. Ivan's gaze was intense in the firelight. Change happens slowly. But tonight, you showed them that orcs are not monsters. You are people with skills and knowledge worth sharing. Tharka wanted to believe him. Looking around at the villagers still lingering, some of whom smiled at her now, she could almost convince herself that things could be different. But she knew better than to trust temporary acceptance. Fear ran deep, and one good meal would not erase generations of hatred. Still, for tonight, she would let herself feel the warmth of belonging, even if it was fleeting. The 2 weeks Ivan had originally promised stretched into 4, then 6. The harvest was completed, the wheat stored in the village granary, but Ivan found other work for Tharka, repairing fences, splitting firewood, preparing the fields for winter. She suspected he was creating tasks simply to have reason to keep her, and she was grateful for it. The barn remained her home, but it felt less like exile now. Ivan had helped her patch the roof and brought her extra blankets against the cold. Sometimes in the evenings, he would appear with leftover dinner and stay to talk, their conversations ranging from farming techniques to philosophy to childhood memories. Tharka found herself living for those moments. Ivan had a way of looking at her that made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she had never experienced. He asked her opinions and listened to her answers. He laughed at her dry observations about village politics, and shared his own frustrations with being a young landowner trying to earn respect from men who had known him since childhood. "They still see me as old Thomas's son," he said one evening, leaning against the barn wall. "Not as Ivan Ashford, farmer in his own right." "You have proven yourself," Tharka said. She was mending a shirt by candlelight, her large hands surprisingly deft with needle and thread. "Your fields produced more wheat than anyone else's this season, because I had orc labor." He said it teasingly, but there was pride in his voice. "You made the difference, Tharka. I could not have done it without you." "Then you should be grateful I was cast out," she said, keeping her tone light to hide the pain that still throbbed when she thought of her clan. Ivan's expression sobered. "Do you miss them?" "Your people," Tharka set down her mending. "I miss what they should have been. The clan I wanted them to be one that valued more than violence and conquest. But the clan they actually are." She shook her head. "No, I do not miss that." "Do you think you will ever go back?" "There is no going back. An orc who is cast out is dead to the clan. If I returned, they would kill me for the dishonor of showing my face again." "Then stay here." The words came out rushed, as if Ivan had been holding them back and they finally escaped. "Stay in Millbrook, permanently." Tharka's heart kicked against her ribs. "Ivan, I know it is not perfect. Some villagers still do not trust you. But it is better than wandering alone, is it not? Better than dying in the waste." He moved closer, and in the candlelight his eyes were impossibly soft. "I want you to stay, Tharka, not just as a laborer, as a member of this community, as a friend." The word friend should have been enough. It was more than Tharka had any right to hope for. But hearing it felt like a door closing on possibilities she had barely allowed herself to imagine. "I will stay," she said, "because what else could she do? Where else could she go? Thank you, Ivan. Your friendship means more than you know." If he noticed the slight emphasis on friendship, the way she turned it into a boundary rather than a bridge, he did not show it. He simply smiled and wished her good night, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the uncomfortable realization that she was developing feelings for a human man who saw her as a friend and nothing more. Winter arrived with brutal speed, blanketing Millbrook in snow and ice. The villagers retreated into their homes, burning through their stores of firewood and food while waiting for spring. Tharka continued working for Ivan, though the tasks shifted to indoor maintenance, repairing tools, organizing storage, cleaning the barn that had become her permanent residence. The cold did not bother her as much as it did the humans. Orcs were built to endure harsh conditions. But she noticed Ivan started leaving his door unlocked, a subtle invitation for her to come inside when the temperature dropped too low even for her thick skin. They fell into an easy domesticity that both comforted and tormented Tharka. She would cook dinner, using the techniques her mother had taught her, and Ivan would sit at the kitchen table talking about his day or reading from the books his father had left behind. Sometimes he would read aloud, and Tharka would listen while she worked, absorbing stories of heroes and adventures in distant lands. "You should learn to raid," Ivan said one evening, looking up from a particularly worn volume. "You are clever enough to pick it up quickly." What use does an orc have for reading? What use does anyone have for it? Knowledge, entertainment, the ability to record your own thoughts. He set the book down. "I could teach you if you wanted." And so they began lessons, Ivan patient and encouraging as Tharka struggled to match symbols to sounds. Her large fingers felt clumsy gripping the quill, making childish letters on precious paper. But slowly, painstakingly, she learned. The closeness required for the lessons was its own form of torture. Ivan would lean over her shoulder to check her work, his breath warm on her neck. His hand would cover hers to guide her penmanship, and Tharka would have to concentrate on breathing normally, on not revealing how his touch affected her. She was certain he had no idea. To Ivan, she was his orc friend, the one he had saved from starvation and who had repaid him with hard work and interesting conversation. The thought that there could be anything more between them would never occur to him. Humans did not fall in love with orcs. But then came the night of the ice storm. It struck without warning, temperatures plummeting so rapidly that the world became a frozen landscape in hours. Tharka was in the barn when she heard Ivan shouting her name, his voice barely audible above the howling wind. She opened the barn door to find him fighting through snow that was already knee-deep, his face red with cold. "You cannot stay out here," he yelled over the storm. "The barn will not hold if this gets worse. Come to the house." "I will be fine, Tharka. Do not argue with me. This is not normal winter weather. This is deadly." His eyes were fierce with worry. "Please." She could not refuse him, not when he looked at her like that. She grabbed her few possessions and followed him through the blizzard to his house, the wind trying to rip her from her feet with every step. Inside, the contrast was startling. Ivan had built up the fire until the main room glowed with warmth. He barred the door behind them and turned to her, brushing snow from her shoulders with familiar ease. "I was worried you would refuse," he admitted. "I almost did." "Why? Do you not know by now that I—" He trailed off, something shifting in his expression. "That I care what happens to you." Tharka's mouth went dry. The way he said it, the intensity in his voice, it suggested something beyond friendship. But she was afraid to hope, afraid to misinterpret. "You have been a good friend to me," she said carefully. "A friend." Ivan repeated the word as if testing its shape. "Is that what you think you are to me, just a friend? What else could I be?" He stared at her for a long moment, snow melting in his hair, creating small droplets that caught the firelight. Then he closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides and took her face in his hands. "You are everything," he said roughly. "You are the first person I think about when I wake and the last before I sleep. You are my partner in work and conversation. You are the bravest, most stubborn, most remarkable person I have ever met. And somewhere between hiring you to harvest wheat and teaching you to read, I fell completely in love with you." Tharka could not breathe, could not think. The words she had convinced herself she would never hear were hanging in the air between them, impossible and perfect. "I am an orc," she whispered. "I know. Your people will never accept this. Some will, others will not. I do not care." His thumbs stroked her cheekbones with infinite gentleness. "I love you, Tharka, your green skin and your tusks and your pointed ears. Your strength and your courage and the way you make everything better just by being near, all of you, every part." "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out. "I have tried not to. I have told myself it was foolish, impossible, but I love you, Ivan Ashford, and I cannot stop." He kissed her then, and it was nothing like Tharka had imagined kisses would be. It was careful and questioning, his lips soft against hers, mindful of her tusks. She made a small sound of surprise and pleasure, and he pulled back immediately. "Did I hurt you?" "No." She grabbed his shirt, pulling him back. "Do not stop." The second kiss was deeper, more confident. Tharka's hands found his hair and his arms came around her waist, holding her close. The storm raged outside, but inside there was only warmth and want and the feeling of coming home to a place she had not known existed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Ivan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight. Not in the barn, not in hiding. Stay here with me." "Yes," Tharka said, because there was no other answer she could give. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies with care and wonder. Ivan traced the patterns of her skin, the places where green shaded darker or lighter. Tharka explored the scars on his chest and arms. each one a story he whispered to her in the darkness. They fit together in ways that should have been impossible, two different species finding harmony in touch and breath and shared pleasure. Afterward, lying tangled in Ivan's bed with his heart beating beneath her ear, Tharka felt something she had not experienced since leaving her clan's safety. Not just physical safety, but the deeper security of being known and loved anyway. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Ivan's hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Now we live. We work. We face whatever comes together." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "And we figure out how to make this village understand that love does not care about the color of your skin or the shape of your teeth. It will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." The storm lasted 3 days, trapping them in the house together. They spent the time in a bubble of domesticity, cooking, reading, making love, talking about their hopes for the future. Ivan shared his dream of expanding his farm, of making it prosperous enough to help other struggling families. Tharka spoke about her mother's recipes and the knowledge of her people that could be shared if only the two cultures could learn to trust each other. "We could be the bridge," Ivan said on the third morning, watching snow fall past the window. "Proof that humans and orcs can live together peacefully." "Or we could be the target," Tharka said. "When people fear change, they attack what threatens them. Then we will be ready." He turned from the window, his expression determined. "I will not hide you, Tharka. I will not pretend you are less than you are or that we are less than we are. If loving you makes me a pariah, so be it. You do not know what you are risking." "Yes, I do, and you are worth it." Tharka crossed to him and took his hands in hers. "We should marry," she said. "If we are going to do this, we should do it properly. Show the village that this is not shameful or temporary, but real and permanent." Ivan's eyes widened. "Are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am." She felt her tusks warm with nervousness. "If you will have an orc wife. If I will, Tharka, there is nothing I want more." He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "Yes, absolutely yes, we will marry, and everyone will see that you are mine and I am yours. The village priest will not perform the ceremony. Then we will find someone who will, or we will marry ourselves before witnesses, and let that be enough." Ivan pulled her close, holding her tight. "I do not need a priest's blessing to know that you are my family, Tharka. You already are." When the storm finally cleared, they emerged to a transformed landscape. The village was buried under snow, houses reduced to smoking chimneys poking through white drifts. The work of digging out and assessing damage would take days. Ivan and Tharka worked side by side, helping neighbors clear paths and check on the elderly. If people noticed the new intimacy between them, the way Ivan's hand would find the small of Tharka's back, or how she stood close enough to him that their shoulders brushed, no one said anything at first. But by the third day the whispers started. Tharka heard them in the market square where she was buying supplies. Two women standing by the baker's stall, their voices carrying in the cold air. "I heard she was in his house during the storm. The entire storm." "Well, where else would she stay?" "The barn was not safe. But alone with him for 3 days. You know what that means. Poor Ivan. That creature has bewitched him somehow. Used orc magic." Tharka kept her face neutral as she paid for bread, but her hands were shaking with suppressed anger. She had expected prejudice, but hearing herself described as a creature who had bewitched Ivan with magic cut deeper than she wanted to admit. She returned to Ivan's house, their house now, though they had not made it official, to find Gareth the miller and several other village men waiting in the yard. Ivan stood on the porch, his posture defensive. "What is happening?" Tharka asked, moving to stand beside him. "Gareth has concerns," Ivan said flatly. "He was just leaving." "We are not leaving until we have answers," Gareth said. The whole village is talking, Ivan. You have that orc living in your house. People are worried about what it means. It means I am in love with her, Ivan said clearly. And we are going to be married. The silence that followed was absolute. Gareth's face went from red to purple. Behind him, the other men shifted uncomfortably, hands moving toward weapons they wore on their belts. That is not possible, Gareth said finally. Humans do not marry monsters. Do not call her that. Ivan's voice dropped to something dangerous. Tharka is more human than half the people in this village. She has worked harder, shown more courage, and brought more value to this community than anyone. If you cannot see that, then you are blind. This is unnatural, one of the other men said. Against the laws of God and nature. Show me the law that forbids it, Ivan challenged. Find me the scripture that says orcs cannot love. You will not find it because your hatred is your own, not God's. The priest will not marry you, Gareth said triumphantly. No one will witness this abomination. Then we will find someone who will. Ivan reached for Tharka's hand, threading his fingers through hers. But make no mistake, this will happen. Tharka is my family now. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who tries to drive her away makes an enemy of me. Is that clear? The men exchanged uneasy glances. Ivan was well liked in the village, respected for his hard work and fair dealing. Turning him into an enemy would cost them. You will regret this, Gareth said finally, but there was defeat in his voice. When that thing shows its true nature, when it turns on you like the monster it is, do not come crying to us. I will not, Ivan said coldly. Now get off my property. They left, but Tharka could see the anger in their stiff shoulders, hear it in their muttered conversations. This was not over, it was only beginning. You should not have said that, she told Ivan once they were alone. About marriage, it will only make things worse. It is the truth. He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. I want to marry you, Tharka. I want everyone to know that you are mine and I am yours. I am not ashamed and I will not hide. I am not ashamed either, but I am afraid. The admission hurt to voice. I am afraid of what they will do to you because of me. Let them try. Ivan's jaw was set with determination. We will face it together. That is what family does. Family. The word settled into Tharka's chest like a warm coal radiating heat. She had lost her family when her clan cast her out, had believed she would never have another. But here was Ivan, offering her not just love but belonging. Then we will marry, she said, and face whatever comes. They asked Mildred the healer to perform the ceremony. She was old enough not to care what people thought and respected enough that her blessing would carry weight. She agreed immediately, her wrinkled face breaking into a smile. About time, she said. I saw the way you two looked at each other at the harvest festival. Took you long enough to figure it out. The wedding was set for the first clear day after the new moon, giving them 2 weeks to prepare. In that time, the village split into factions. Some families, like Thomas the farmer and several of the younger villagers who remembered Tharka's cooking, supported the union. Others, led by Gareth, spoke openly of driving the orc out by force if necessary. Tharka continued her work, helping Ivan with winter chores and beginning to teach a few interested villagers about orc cooking techniques and herbal remedies. She held her head high despite the insults shouted at her from doorways, despite the children who were suddenly forbidden from speaking to her. Ivan stood beside her through all of it, his presence a constant source of strength. He defended her in the tavern when men spoke too loudly about what should be done with monsters. He brought her to market and dared anyone to refuse to serve her. He made it clear through every action that Tharka was under his protection and that he would not tolerate threats. 3 days before the wedding, violence finally came. Tharka was alone in the barn, organizing supplies when 4 men entered. She recognized them as some of Gareth's friends, their faces hard with drink and hatred. "You should have left when you had the chance," the largest one said. "Now we have to make you leave." Tharka assessed them quickly. She was strong, but there were 4 of them and they were armed with clubs and knives. She could probably take 2 before they overwhelmed her. "Ivan will know who did this," she said calmly. "Hurting me will not end well for you. Ivan is not here, and by the time he finds you, you will be gone, driven back into the waste where monsters belong." They advanced as a group, and Tharka prepared to fight. But before the first blow could fall, the barn door burst open and Ivan appeared, a wood-cutting axe in his hands. "Touch her and I will kill you," he said, and there was no doubt in Tharka's mind that he meant it. The soldier he had once been was visible in his stance, in the way he held the axe like it weighed nothing. The men hesitated. They had expected to find Tharka alone and vulnerable, not facing down an armed and furious Ivan Ashford. "This is not your fight," one of them said, but his voice wavered. "Everything involving Tharka is my fight. She is my betrothed, my family." Ivan's eyes were cold as winter ice. "You are trespassing on my property and threatening someone under my protection. Leave now, or I will treat you as the criminals you are." For a moment, violence hung in the air like a held breath. Then the largest man spat on the barn floor and gestured to his companions. "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Ivan said. "Because if any of you come near Tharka again, I will go to the magistrate in the next town. I will bring charges. And I will make sure everyone knows that you are men who attack unarmed women in barns. How respected will you be then?" They left, but slowly, making sure Ivan and Tharka knew they were choosing to leave rather than being forced out. When the barn was empty again, Ivan dropped the axe and pulled Tharka into his arms. "Are you hurt?" "No, you came in time." She held him tightly, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "How did you know?" "I saw them heading this direction with weapons. I am not foolish enough to think they were going hunting." He pulled back to look at her, his hands checking her over for injuries despite her assurances. "We need to be more careful. I should not have left you alone." "I can protect myself, I know. But you should not have to, not here, not in what should be your home." His voice broke slightly. "I am sorry, Tharka. I thought the village was getting better. I thought they were learning to accept you. Some are, others never will." She cupped his face in her hands. "But it does not matter. As long as I have you, I can face anything. You do have me, always." He kissed her, deep and claiming. "In 3 days we will stand before witnesses and make vows, and then let anyone try to separate us." The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the sky a brilliant blue that seemed to bless the occasion. Mildred had agreed to hold the ceremony in her large garden, which was dormant for winter but still beautiful with its stone paths and ancient trees. Tharka dressed in new clothes that Ivan had commissioned from the village seamstress, a dress of deep forest green that complemented her skin and was tailored to her muscular frame. It was the first time she had worn anything so fine, and she felt strange and exposed in it. Ivan wore his father's best coat, his hair combed back and his face shaved smooth. When he saw Tharka, his expression softened into something so tender it made her chest ache. "You are beautiful," he said, taking her hands. "I am an orc in a dress." "You are beautiful," he repeated firmly. "The most beautiful thing I have ever seen." The guests began to arrive, fewer than Tharka had hoped, more than she had feared. Thomas and his family came, along with several other farmers who had worked alongside Tharka during harvest. The young people who had tasted her cooking came, curiosity overcoming their parents' objections. Mildred stood at the center of the garden, wearing formal healer robes and holding an old book of ceremonies. Gareth and his faction were notably absent, as was the village priest. but there were enough witnesses to make the marriage legal, enough friendly faces to make it feel like a celebration rather than a rebellion. Mildred began the ceremony with a prayer to the old gods, the ones who predated the current church and cared more about intention than species. She spoke about the nature of love, how it bridged divides and created new possibilities. "Ivan Ashford," she said, turning to him, "you take this woman, Tharka, to be your wife, to stand with her in prosperity and hardship, to honor her as your equal and partner, to love her all your days." "I do," Ivan said, his voice clear and strong. "I take Tharka as my wife, my partner, my family. I will stand with her against any who oppose us. I will honor her strength and cherish her gentleness. I will love her until my last breath and beyond." Tears pricked at Tharka's eyes. No one had ever spoken of her with such reverence, such complete acceptance. "Tharka," Mildred said, turning to her, "you take this man, Ivan Ashford, to be your husband, to stand with him in prosperity and hardship, to honor him as your equal and partner, to love him all your days." "I do," Tharka said, her voice thick with emotion. "I take Ivan as my husband, my partner, my family. I will stand with him against any who oppose us. I will honor his courage and cherish his kindness. I will love him until my last breath and beyond." Mildred smiled, her old eyes bright with tears. "Then by the power vested in me as healer and elder of this village, I declare you married. May your union be blessed with joy, prosperity, and understanding. May you be an example of what is possible when fear gives way to love." Ivan kissed her then, in front of all the witnesses, claiming her as his wife before God and community. The small crowd cheered, and Tharka felt something settle in her soul, a sense of rightness, of being exactly where she belonged. The celebration that followed was modest but genuine. Tharka had cooked, of course, preparing several orc dishes that the guests tried with enthusiasm. Wine flowed freely, and music played on a fiddle brought by one of the farmers. Children danced around the garden, and for a few hours it was possible to forget the hostility that still lurked beyond Mildred's walls. As the sun began to set, Thomas approached Tharka with a serious expression. "I want to apologize," he said quietly, "for how I treated you when you first arrived. For assuming you were a threat. You had reason to be cautious," Tharka said. "I was a stranger, an orc. That does not excuse prejudice." He glanced at Ivan, who was talking with Mildred across the garden. "You have been good for him, good for all of us, truth be told. You work harder than anyone, and you have shared knowledge that has helped my crops. You are a valued member of this community, Tharka. I hope you will stay for many years to come." "I plan to," Tharka said, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "This is my home now." One by one, other guests approached to offer similar sentiments. Not everyone in the village accepted her, but enough did. Enough to make a difference. That night, alone in their house with the fire burning low, Ivan and Tharka lay together in the bed they now officially shared. He traced the line of her jaw, his touch reverent. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "I am," Tharka said, and realized it was true. Despite the challenges, despite the prejudice they still faced, she was happy. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tips of her pointed ears. "I love you, Tharka Ashford." The name still sounded strange to her ears, Tharka Ashford, wife of Ivan, member of human society. But it was hers now, and she would wear it with pride. "I love you too," she whispered. "My husband." The winter passed slowly, as winters do in farming villages. Ivan and Tharka settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They worked together, cooked together, read together in the evenings. Tharka continued her reading lessons and began teaching Ivan some of the orc language in return. They talked about everything and nothing, building a foundation of intimacy that went deeper than physical attraction. The village remained divided. Gareth's faction refused to acknowledge the marriage, treating Tharka as if she were still just an unwelcome visitor. But others began coming to the house with questions about orc farming techniques or herbal remedies. Tharka shared what she knew freely, and slowly, gradually, more people began to see her as a resource rather than a threat. In early spring, a delegation arrived from the nearest city officials who had heard about the unprecedented marriage between human and orc. They came expecting to find scandal or violation of law, but Ivan met them with property deeds, marriage documents signed by Mildred, and the support of enough villagers to make their objections meaningless. The marriage is legal, the lead official finally admitted, grudgingly impressed by Ivan's preparation. Unconventional but legal. And it will remain legal, Ivan said firmly. Tharka is my wife, a property owner and a member of this community. Anyone who challenges that will face me in court. The officials left and the village breathed easier. If the city recognized the marriage, then it was truly legitimate. Gareth and his supporters would have to find a new cause to champion. As spring turned to summer, Tharka began to notice changes in her body. She was tired more often, her appetite increased, and there was a tenderness in her breasts that had not been there before. At first, she dismissed it as the effects of hard work and good food after years of deprivation. But when she missed her monthly bleeding for the second time, she knew. She was pregnant. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Pregnancy between humans and orcs was rare but not impossible. The two species were similar enough that occasionally their unions produced children. But those children were often ostracized by both cultures, belonging fully to neither. Fear warred with joy in Tharka's chest. She wanted Ivan's child with a fierceness that surprised her. But she was terrified of what it would mean, how the village would react, whether the child would be healthy. She waited until evening to tell Ivan. They were in the garden, planting vegetables for the summer harvest, when she finally found the courage to speak. "I need to tell you something," she said, setting down her spade. Ivan looked up, immediately alert to her serious tone. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." "At least I hope nothing is wrong." She took a deep breath. "I am pregnant, Ivan. We are going to have a child." For a moment he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then a smile broke across his face like sunrise, brilliant and all-encompassing. "We are having a baby," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes. In the autumn, I think." He crossed to her in 3 quick strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her once before setting her down carefully as if she had suddenly become fragile. "This is wonderful. This is Tharka. We are going to be parents." His joy was infectious, washing away some of her fear. "You are not worried about what people will say." "I do not care what people say." He placed a hand on her stomach, which showed no sign of change yet. "Our child will be loved and wanted and protected. That is all that matters." "The child will be half orc," Tharka said quietly, "neither fully human nor fully orc. There will be those who see them as an abomination. Then those people are fools." Ivan's expression turned fierce. "Our child will be perfect. A bridge between 2 worlds, just like our marriage. And anyone who tries to hurt them will answer to me." Tharka felt tears slip down her cheeks. "How are you so brave, so certain?" "Because I have you." He kissed her softly. "You taught me that love is stronger than fear, that change is possible. Our child will be proof of that. Living proof that humans and orcs can build a future together." They told Mildred first, wanting her medical expertise to ensure the pregnancy progressed healthily. The old healer was delighted, immediately listing herbs and precautions and promising to assist with the birth. "This is historic," she said, her eyes shining. The first human-orc child born to a recognized marriage. Your child will be a symbol of what is possible. Our child will be a child, Ivan corrected gently. Not a symbol. Just a child who deserves to grow up safe and loved. Of course, Mildred agreed. But you cannot deny the significance. This changes everything. Word spread quickly through the village. Reactions were mixed. Some families were genuinely happy, seeing the pregnancy as confirmation that the marriage was real and permanent. Others were horrified, calling it unnatural and predicting disaster. Gareth organized a meeting in the tavern, speaking loudly about the abomination that would be born and how the village should respond. But his support had eroded over the months. Too many people had benefited from Tharka's knowledge, had seen her work ethic and kindness. When he called for action to prevent the birth, he found himself shouted down by villagers who had once stood with him. Enough, Thomas said, standing up in the crowded tavern. Tharka has proven herself 100 times over. She works hard, she helps her neighbors, she has broken no laws. If she and Ivan want to raise a family, that is their business. Any man who threatens a pregnant woman is no man at all. There were murmurs of agreement. Gareth looked around at his dwindling support and seemed to deflate. This will end badly, he muttered, but there was no force behind it. You will all see. As Tharka's pregnancy progressed, the village rallied around her in ways she had not expected. Women who had once avoided her began offering advice about childbirth and infant care. Families donated baby clothes and blankets. Thomas's wife organized a celebration in Tharka and Ivan's honor, inviting the whole village to bring gifts for the coming child. Tharka stood in her garden, surrounded by neighbors who were becoming friends, and felt overwhelmed by the acceptance. This was what her mother had dreamed of: orcs and humans living together peacefully, sharing knowledge and building community. It had seemed impossible once. Now it was real. The summer was long and hot, and Tharka's belly swelled with new life. She had to stop doing heavy work, which frustrated her, but Ivan was attentive and supportive. He took over tasks she could no longer manage and made sure she rested. In the evenings, he would talk to her stomach, telling their unborn child stories about the farm and the village and the life they would have together. "You will have your mother's strength," he said one night, his hand spread across her belly. "And her courage. And maybe my stubbornness, though let us hope not too much of it. Our child will be perfect," Tharka said, covering his hand with hers, "because they will be ours." In late autumn, when the leaves were turning gold and red, Tharka went into labor. Ivan sent for Mildred immediately, his face pale with worry. The healer arrived with her supplies and took charge of the situation with calm efficiency. "This is natural," she said, helping Tharka into bed. "Your body knows what to do. Breathe through the pain and push when I tell you." The labor was long and difficult. Tharka's orc physiology made the process different than it would be for a human woman, and the child was large. But Ivan stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, ignoring the pain when her grip became crushing. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. You can do this." Finally, after hours that felt like days, a baby's cry filled the room. Mildred lifted the infant, cleaning them quickly before placing them in Tharka's arms. "A girl," the healer said, her voice thick with emotion. "A healthy baby girl." Tharka looked down at her daughter and felt her heart expand impossibly. The baby had green skin like her mother, but a lighter shade that showed her mixed heritage. Her ears were pointed but smaller than a full orc's. She had tiny tusks just beginning to emerge. Her eyes, when they opened, were brown like Ivan's. "She is perfect," Tharka whispered. Ivan leaned over them both, his face wet with tears. "She is our miracle." He touched the baby's tiny hand and she gripped his finger with surprising strength. What should we name her? They had discussed names for months, never quite settling on one. But looking at her daughter now, Tharka knew. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope, because that is what she represented, hope for a future where human and orc children could grow up together in peace. Hope that love could overcome prejudice. Hope that change, real and lasting change, was possible. The villagers came to visit over the following days, bringing more gifts and offering congratulations. Even some of Gareth's former supporters stopped by, curious to see the half-orc baby and finding themselves charmed by her tiny tusks and bright eyes. Gareth himself never came, but he stopped speaking out against the marriage, stopped trying to organize resistance. The birth of Hope had proven something that words never could, that human and orc could create life together, that their union was real and permanent and blessed with new possibilities. As winter settled in again, Tharka sat by the fire nursing her daughter while Ivan read aloud from one of his books. Outside, snow fell softly, blanketing the village in white. But inside their home, there was only warmth and love and the sound of Hope's contented breathing. "Do you remember when you first arrived?" Ivan asked, setting down his book, standing in the road with nothing but a knife and determination. "I remember thinking I would die before winter came," Tharka said. "I had no hope left, and then you offered me shelter. Best decision I ever made." He moved to sit beside her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "You have given me everything, Tharka. A partner, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You have made me better than I was." "You gave me the same," Tharka said softly. "You saw me when everyone else saw only a monster. You gave me a home when I had none. You loved me when I thought love was impossible." She looked down at Hope, who had fallen asleep at her breast. "And you gave me her, our beautiful daughter." "Our family," Ivan corrected. He kissed Tharka's temple, then Hope's forehead. "The first of many, I hope. We will fill this house with children who belong to both our peoples. We will show the world that unity is possible." "One step at a time," Tharka said, but she was smiling. "Let us raise Hope first, teach her to be strong and kind and brave. And then we will see about changing the world." "Fair enough." Ivan settled back against the chair, holding them both close. "Though I think we have already changed it more than you realize. Look at what we have built, Tharka. A marriage that should not exist according to everyone's prejudices. A child who bridges two species. A community that is slowly learning to accept differences. We have proven that love is stronger than hate." Tharka thought about the harvest festival, about the first time the villagers had tasted her cooking and seen her as something other than a threat. She thought about their wedding, standing before witnesses and making vows that would have been impossible a year earlier. She thought about Thomas's apology and Mildred's support, and all the small moments of acceptance that had accumulated into real change. Ivan was right. They had changed the world, at least their small corner of it. Not through grand gestures or violence, but through the simple, radical act of loving each other despite everything that said they should not. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For laughing when I said I could cook, then letting one taste shut your mouth and open your heart." She smiled at the memory at how far they had come. "For seeing me, for choosing me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for coming to Millbrook," Ivan replied. "For staying even when it was hard, for believing we could make this work." He tightened his arm around her. "I love you, Tharka Ashford, today and always." "I love you too," she whispered. Hope stirred in her arms, making small, contented sounds. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the house's corners. But inside, the three of them were safe and warm, a family forged from impossible circumstances and sustained by stubborn love. Spring came again, and with it new growth. The garden flourished under Tharka's care, producing vegetables and herbs in abundance. Ivan's fields yielded their best harvest yet. Hope grew strong and healthy, her laugh filling the house with joy. More changes came to Millbrook. Inspired by Tharka's success, another orc approached the village seeking work, a male who had been cast out for similar reasons. Ivan helped him find employment with Thomas, who needed extra hands on his expanding farm. Then another orc came, and another. They did not come in raiding parties, but as individuals seeking peaceful coexistence. Not everyone welcomed them. Gareth left Millbrook entirely, unable to stomach the changes. A few families followed him, but most stayed, discovering that orcs could be neighbors and co-workers and even friends. Tharka began holding weekly cooking classes, teaching humans and orcs alike the recipes her mother had passed down. Ivan organized trade negotiations with a nearby orc clan, facilitating exchanges of metalwork and herbs for grain and manufactured goods. The village prospered in ways that would have been impossible without the cooperation between species, and through it all, hope grew. She learned to walk and talk, to play with the human and orc children who became her friends. She showed her mother's strength and her father's kindness, navigating two worlds with the ease of one who had never known they were supposed to be separate. On Hope's second birthday, Tharka stood in the garden watching her daughter chase butterflies while Ivan set up tables for the celebration. The whole village had been invited and most were coming. She thought about the terrified, desperate orc who had arrived in Millbrook 2 years earlier, expecting death or at best temporary shelter. She had found so much more. A home, a husband, a daughter, a community. A future that included all the things she had thought lost forever when her clan cast her out. "What are you thinking about?" Ivan asked, coming to stand beside her. "Everything," Tharka said. How impossible this all seemed, how impossible it still seems sometimes. And yet here we are. He took her hand, threading their fingers together. Proof that impossible things happen every day. Hope ran over, holding a flower she had picked. "For you, Mama," she said, offering it to Tharka with a gap-toothed smile. Tharka took the flower, her heart so full it ached. "Thank you, little one." "It is beautiful, like you," Hope declared, then ran off to find more flowers. Ivan laughed. "She is right, you know, you are beautiful, inside and out." "So are you," Tharka said. "Thank you for everything, Ivan, for this life, for this family." "Thank you for trusting me," he replied. "For taking a chance on a human farmer who had no idea what he was doing." "You knew exactly what you were doing," Tharka corrected. "You were choosing love over fear, and that made all the difference." The party was a success, filled with laughter and food, and the sound of children playing together regardless of skin color or tusk size. Tharka watched it all with quiet satisfaction, knowing that this was her mother's dream realized, two peoples coming together in peace, sharing knowledge and celebration, building something new and better than what existed before. As the sun set and guests began departing, Mildred pulled Tharka aside. "You have done something remarkable here," the old healer said. "When you arrived, I thought Ivan was making a terrible mistake. I am glad to have been proven wrong." "You were one of the first to support us," Tharka reminded her. "You married us when no one else would." "I believed in love," Mildred said simply. "And you too proved that belief was justified. You have changed this village, Tharka, made it better. Made it a place where different peoples can live together in harmony. That is no small thing." "It started with one person offering shelter," Tharka said, looking at Ivan, who was helping Hope blow out candles. "Everything else grew from that single act of kindness." "Then perhaps we should all practice more kindness," Mildred said, "if it can produce such remarkable results." That night, after Hope was tucked into bed and the house was clean, Tharka and Ivan sat together on their porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. "I want another child," Ivan said suddenly. "Is that foolish, to want to expand our family when we have only just begun?" "It is not foolish," Tharka said. "I want that too, a brother or sister for hope, more bridges between our peoples." "More love to give," Ivan said. "More proof that this works, that we can build something lasting." "Then we will," Tharka said simply. "We will build a family and a future, together." He kissed her then, soft and sweet, full of promise. And Tharka knew that whatever challenges came, they would face them as they had faced everything else, with courage, love, and stubborn determination. The story of how an orc girl arrived in Millbrook and changed everything would be told for generations. How she proved that cooking could open hearts, that hard work could earn respect, that love could overcome prejudice. How she married a human farmer and bore a child who represented hope for a better future. But for Tharka, it was not a story. It was simply her life, the life she had built from nothing, the family she had found when she had no clan, the home she had created in a place that once feared her. They laughed when the orc girl said she could cook. One taste shut every mouth in the village. And that taste, that moment of acceptance, had been the beginning of everything. Years passed, and the Ashford family grew. Hope gained two siblings, a brother named Thomas Ivan Ashford, who had his father's brown eyes and his mother's green skin, and a sister named Mara, who looked almost entirely human except for the small tusks that emerged when she smiled. The children grew up surrounded by love, never questioning whether it was normal to have an orc mother and human father. To them, it was simply the way families were. Millbrook evolved into something unique, a village where humans and orcs lived side by side, working together and intermarrying with increasing frequency. Other settlements began sending delegations to learn how they had achieved such peaceful coexistence. Ivan and Tharka found themselves in the unlikely role of ambassadors, teaching others the lessons they had learned through trial and error. The secret, they always said, was simple: treat each other as people first, species second. Share food and stories. Work together toward common goals. Remember that love and family matter more than the color of skin or the shape of teeth. It was not always easy. Prejudice died hard, and there were always those who could not accept change. But slowly, gradually, the world began to shift. More interspecies marriages occurred. More mixed heritage children were born. More communities discovered that cooperation produced better results than conflict. And through it all, the Ashford family remained at the center, proof that impossible things could become reality when people were brave enough to try. On the 10th anniversary of Tharka's arrival in Millbrook, the village threw a celebration. It had become a tradition, marking the day that everything changed. There were speeches and food and music, but the highlight was always the same: Tharka cooking her hearth stew, the dish that had first opened hearts and minds. As she stirred the pot, surrounded by her children and husband, watched by villagers who were now friends and family, Tharka thought about the frightened orc girl who had stood in the road a decade earlier, desperate and alone. That girl could never have imagined this: a loving husband, 3 beautiful children, a community that accepted her, a life rich with purpose and joy. She had been prepared to die in the waste, had thought her story was ending. Instead, it had only been the beginning. "Taste this," Tharka said, offering Ivan a spoonful of stew. "Tell me if it needs more salt." He tried it, his face breaking into a familiar smile. "Perfect, just like the first time you made it." "That time changed everything," Tharka said softly. "No," Ivan corrected, pulling her close despite the crowd around them. "You changed everything. The stew was just the proof." Hope bounded over with her siblings, all three children demanding to taste the famous dish. Tharka served them, watching their faces light up with pleasure. They would grow up in a world different from the one she had known, a world where love between species was accepted, where differences were celebrated rather than feared. They would grow up in a world she and Ivan had helped create, one stubborn act of kindness at a time. As the celebration continued around her, Tharka felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, for the man who had seen her worth when no one else would, for the children who carried the hope of two peoples in their veins, for the community that had learned to accept what it once feared. She had been cast out of her clan for refusing to hate. That rejection had seemed like the end of everything. But it had actually been the beginning of a life she never could have imagined, filled with more love and belonging than she had thought possible. They laughed when the orc girl said she could cook. One taste shut every mouth in the village. And from that moment of acceptance, a new world had grown, one where humans and orcs could love, marry, raise families, and build futures together. It was not the world Tharka had been born into, but it was the world she had helped create. A world where her children would never know the pain of being cast out for showing compassion. A world where kindness mattered more than species. A world where love, in all its forms, could flourish. And that, Tharka thought as she served stew to another eager villager, was the happiest ending she could have imagined. The story that began with a desperate orc seeking shelter had become a tale of transformation of a village, a culture, and a world learning that the things that unite us are stronger than the things that divide us. It was a story that would be told for generations, passed down to children and grandchildren, a reminder that change was always possible when people were brave enough to choose love over fear. But for now, on this perfect autumn evening with her family around her and her community celebrating, Tharka simply lived it. She had found her place in the world, not by denying who she was, but by embracing it fully while opening her heart to possibilities she had never imagined. She had arrived in Millbrook expecting nothing but a few weeks of shelter before winter claimed her. Instead, she had found everything: home, family, love, purpose, and proof that even the most impossible dreams could come true when met with courage, kindness, and stubborn hope. The sun set over Millbrook, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The celebration continued into the night, full of laughter and music and the sound of community. And at the center of it all was the Ashford family, human, orc, and the beautiful blend of both, living proof that love knew no boundaries, and that the future belonged to those brave enough to build it together.